Oh, I think I'm live. Okay. That was actually by accident because I was still preparing. Hi, this is Dr. Cindy, otherwise known as Dr. Nanny. My name is Cynthia Elise Smith. I am an educator, an anti-racism essayist, and educator. Anyway, hi everybody who are joining in. Those of you who are joining in, how are you? What I'm going to be talking about today is an essay that I wrote. Now, let me say this right from the door. My voice is not usually this deep and sultry, okay? I have been battling a viral infection for like 2 weeks, and I'm at the point now where I'm not feverish and everything, and I want to thank everybody who sent well wishes on Facebook. Thank you. And of course, today was my guilty pleasure, my once every 2 week narcissistic rant on Facebook, otherwise known as Saturday Selfie Day, where I get my hair done and I take my family through the blow by blow. I also want to mention that I'm in my grandson's bedroom, so be prepared that at any point during this essay reading and discussion, he will run in here and he will probably ask me why I'm in his room and, disturbing the peace. Anyway, let's get started. The essay is titled Black Ethnicity and Lineage in America. Where are the roots of blackness in America in the 21st century? As always, like, share with people that you think it's important for them to know. Because if nothing else, what I write and when I read it to you, it's going to make you think. It's going to make you think. Damn, I never thought about that before. Well, see, that's my purpose. If I make you think about something you would not have ordinarily thought about, then I have done my job. Okay? Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Shirley Chisholm, Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier. Here we have a former president, a senator, and a former congressperson, as well as two well-known actors and civil rights activists. You might ask, what do they all share? Well, they have two things in common. They are all first-generation Americans from either one or both immigrant parents, and they all share the same skin color. Now, I want you to understand this. See, because we're going to be talking about color. They all share the same skin color, even though Sidney Poitier is dark, Kamala, Barack, and Harry Belafonte are lighter. However, they all share the same skin color as defined by white Americans in the United States. Keep that in mind, okay? These human beings are people of color. That's all you hear now. People of color. They are Black Americans. Each has had varying experiences with blackness as expressed by the culture of white America, and I can reasonably assume had at least one microaggressive act of individual behavioral bigotry thrown into each of their lives at some point in their lives. The discussion of Kamala Harris as a viable candidate for president in 2020 is the impetus for my essay. However, notwithstanding the obvious juxtaposition between progressive, liberal, and center political leanings. This essay is not about Kamala or politics. This essay is about blackness in America. It is about what it means to be black to black people and what it means to be black to white people. It is about whether black African American descendants of the enslavement, and I'm going to give you the acronym because there are three: AADOE, AADOS, or DOS. Dr. Yvette Carnell uses the latter. But I always like to differentiate it, and I don't say slavery, I say enslavement, because what that does is it gives it more power, and it actually gives it a little dignity when you say the enslavement, because it wasn't something that we necessarily, it's kind of like the Holocaust. Well, this is the enslavement, okay? So I guess you get it that way. All right, anyway. It is about whether black African American descendants of the enslavement are even relevant in the definition of blackness today in favor of people of color. It is about whether they should be considered a distinct and differentiated demographic. Or has white supremacy actually succeeded in bleaching its revisionist history so that color alone and not the lineage created by the enslavement constitutes blackness in the 21st century? Now, I hope you understand me and follow me so far. If you identify as black and are reading my essay or listening to me here, ask yourself how you personally consider yourself as being black in America. Ask yourself how you and your ancestors came to be here in this country. Were your ancestors enslaved in the United States, or does your family have generational ties to another country with which you can identify? It is important to understand that for purposes of this essay, being enslaved is only being meant as being enslaved in the United States. Why? This will hopefully become clear later. So I want you to consider the following. African American descendants of the enslavement are the only people with no generational roots other than those of enslaved people from an entire continent, since they were stolen from different geographical regions of Africa and brought to the U.S. Here's what this means. This means while other enslaved people in the hemisphere were able to adopt the countries where they were brought to and have generational lineage in those geographical regions, for example, Jamaicans from Jamaica, Haitians from Haiti, etc. The U.S. is the only generational reference for African American descendants of the enslavement for their lineage other than the entire continent of Africa. Thus, the identification, just in case you ever wanted to know, initially, thus the identification African American. Now, despite the colorization issues inherent in these countries for obvious reasons of white supremacy and colonization, colorization in those countries is not the purpose of this essay. In those countries, the point is, when people immigrate to the U.S. from other countries, they still own their original nationality and ethnicity. In fact, their children also inherit this lineage. If you research any of the people mentioned above, mentioned in the beginning of my essay, you will undoubtedly read about their roots. Indeed, if you ask any non-white person with roots in another country what they are, they will tell you their nationality before their association with being Americans, and certainly before referencing color, if at all. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. You can't take that away from them. Although later on, as we read on in America, you're going to find out that they have. White people took that away. As of 2010, listen up, because it's going to get deep, okay? And like I said, if there's anybody that you want to listen to read this, to understand what's going on, share the essay, look on my page, share the essay, or share this video, okay? So there is nothing wrong with them referencing their nationalities and ethnicities. Okay? What is wrong, however, is the nature of white supremacy and racism in the United States and what it has done and continues to do to the roots of African American descendants of the enslavement. People with their roots in the enslavement have had to endure a relentless, destructive legacy, an enormous stigma of being lazy, no account, criminal, with just about every negative connotation of dark and decrepit that could ever be placed on a singular group of people. So, who in their right minds, sharing the same skin color with African American descendants of the enslavement, or African Americans, as it was originally defined before 2010. Keep that in mind. Who in their right mind would want to come to this country and identify with this stigma that's associated with white America's definition of blackness? Would you? I know I wouldn't. If I came from Jamaica, I would not want to have an association with that stuff. I'm a hard-working person. I know, I ain't Jamaican. I ain't going to talk Jamaican. But the point is, I'm going to say I'm Jamaican first. I'm going to cling to my nationality because I have that. That's what I have. Ain't nothing wrong with it. Now, I know a lot of you people are like, yeah, but if you're black, you're black. If you're black, you're black. Some people do have roots. I know there are many people reading this or essay or listening to me right now who can recall instances where non-white people in this country have distanced themselves from the unique circumstance of blackness as it is expressed in the U.S. and by Americans in the U.S. Okay? All of us. There are precious few who will acknowledge true kinship with the experience of being an African American, as that term is used to describe African American descendants of the enslavement. See, so I want you to begin to understand that there is a demographic in this country who are the African American descendants of the enslavement. You need to understand that this is a bona fide demographic. And as I go on, you're going to see even more in more detail. Okay? So, as that term is described by, and the definition of white America's description of African American, as even as they share almost every hue with us, from cream to the darkest brown of black, as white America describes. So you need to understand there's a difference between what we determine is blackness for us and what white America has defined. And they are the ones who designed the entire social construct of race, so they dictate who's black and who's not. Listen tight. Considering the fact that black people in the U.S. were defined by most white people as non-human since the enslavement, it is no wonder that even after it ended, laws were created and a system of subjugation was put into place for these same people and for their descendants on the basis of race. Of course, at that time, color was the most convenient tool for differentiation of the races, of which there were only two, black and white. Okay, back then it wasn't none but black and white. Okay, all these generations later, the ravages of racism and discrimination created for these specific people in this country, racism was designed for the newly freed slaves and their descendants. That's what it was designed for. It is no coincidence that white America has been fighting with itself, deciding which way to deal with its black problem. It has for generations been wrestling with either side of the spectrum of racism, from annihilation to assimilation. After the Civil Rights Act of 1964, guess what? The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 was enacted, due in part to the quota system in place, which prior to the 1960s saw more than half of the immigrants into the United States coming from Europe. Now, what ended up happening was, that's discriminatory. Okay? So, by the turn of the 21st century, the number of immigrants from Africa, Mexico, and Asia had increased substantially. It is also no coincidence. Excuse me, still wrestling a little bit with this cold. It is also no coincidence that nationality, ethnicity, and indeed race has been poured into the proverbial pot of chocolate in America, stirred and melted together, so that now, at least to white America, race as associated with the color black is all the same, whether it is actually or not. People of color. Oh, I hate when my computer does this. You're going to have to excuse me for a minute, because this thing is trying to get like super duper big and act real stupid. And my zoom is off. Oh, you know what? I hate when this computer. Okay, here we go. All right. Yeah. This means, I'm back. This means that the spectrum of racism leaned toward assimilation instead of annihilation. Because that was what was going on during the 50s and the 60s and the whole civil rights movement. There were policies and decisions being made on how to handle their Negro problem. Okay? Now, although the latter faction, the annihilation faction, which is the far right, steadily paced itself toward the place where African American descendants of the enslavement find themselves today. See, they never stopped working toward what we are experiencing today. Okay? Indeed, the reason for the issue of immigration today is not what you think. Okay? It is one that actually began with the advent of the Civil Rights Movement and the Immigration Act, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. What's more, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is either credited or blamed for the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, depending on which side of that racist spectrum you live on. But here's a question for you. What has happened to African American descendants of the enslavement in the decades since the Civil Rights Movement, the paradigm shift of colorblind post-racialism, the advent of diversity, and people of color? I'll explain. The paradigm shift of colorblind post-racialism, the advent of diversity, and the most recent people of color identifier illustrated to the nation that the assimilation side of the system of racism had won, so to speak. In the meantime, whiteness had disappeared in favor of nude, natural, neutral, and normal. There was also, and in the meantime, while whiteness disappeared, there was a cataclysmic change occurring with regard to blackness that no one noticed. And guess what? Until I read that census information, I really hadn't noticed it myself. I had some suspicions, but when I started doing my research, it hit me so hard. It was like somebody punched me right here. Bam! Just like that. And I said, I got to think. Let me start thinking. Okay, let me start writing. Okay, let me start educating so that other people understand what's been going on while we have not even really understood. And I can't say we weren't paying attention. When you're trying to live life, you're not trying to pay attention. But see, I'm here to give you that opportunity within the next however many minutes that I'm going through this with you to pay attention and to be educated and to learn. Okay? The distinction of African American descendants of the enslavement, I want you to listen to this, having a unique stake in the U.S. by virtue of its roots, was always an impediment to white America. You know that. You know that. It always has been. Think reparations. Therefore, a concerted effort by the white supremacists who favored assimilation. Now, this is what happened with the ones that favored assimilation, okay? With a tacit approval of the ones, to say the right, or those who favored annihilation, began the policy of erasing any claim by African American descendants in the future. This is why. This is how. Here's how. The goal was to eliminate specific identity of African American descendants of the enslavement, to erase that as an identity here in America. Do you understand? Are you understanding what I'm saying? And essentially rendering color or blackness, as they define it, alone, in this case, as the sole determinant of racial distinction in the U.S. And any generational ancestral roots in the enslavement would then gradually lose any importance. You've already got people saying, slavery what? What? That was so long ago. Okay? And do keep in mind, I'm still looking for the data on it, but I did receive some information that it suggests that only 1 in 7, line up 7 people and then pull out 1, is a descendant of the enslavement in this country anymore. All right? So, if they're essentially rendering color or blackness alone, as in this case, as the sole determinant of racial distinction in the U.S., and any generational ancestral roots in the enslavement will gradually lose any importance, eventually disappearing into obscurity from U.S. history as no more than a glancing footnote. Now, here's the deal. According to the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, in its 2010 census report, I want you to hear this. Black or African American refers to a person having origins in any of the black racial groups in Africa. That's the first one. The black racial category includes people who marked black, African Americans, or Negro. Check boxes. Now I want you to listen to this. It also includes respondents who reported entries such as African American, Sub-Saharan African entries such as Kenyan and Nigerian, and Afro-Caribbean entries such as Haitian and Jamaican. Okay? Nigerian, Kenyan, Haitian, Jamaican. Sub-Saharan African entries are classified as black or African American. Now you got to hear this. With the exception, now remember now, these are the people who are defining for you, black people, what black is. Sub-Saharan, with the exception of Sudanese and Cape Verdean, I'm not sure how that, it's Verdean, Cape Verdean, because of their complex historical heritage. I would be interested in researching that to find out what this complex heritage is, okay? But listen to me, people, North African entries are classified as white, as the OMB defines white. Remember now, Office of Management and Budget, they is white people, they is the people in power in the government, and they say, as OMB defines white, as a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Okay? The terms black and black or African American are used interchangeably. So whether you say African American or black, it's the same thing. If you Jamaican, you African American. If you Haitian, you African American. If you Kenyan and Nigerian, you African American. Okay? All right. Moreover, it is recognized that the categories of the race question include the categories of the race question include race, national origin, and socio-cultural groups. So as far as this country is concerned, so the question is, what does all this mean? It means that in America, as far as white America is concerned, black and African American are associated with skin color, no matter the nationality or ethnicity, and are used interchangeably. This means that you Jamaican Americans need to understand that even though you own your nationality, when you come here, you identify with the stigma, whether you want to or not. It doesn't matter whether you are descendant from the enslavement. It means that African American descendants of the enslavement no longer, hold on one second, the babies are here. Shh. Listen, y'all have to go in the other room because Nanny is doing a video. Okay.
We're just taking the gun.
Okay. You want to come and just look in the camera for a minute and say hi?
Hi. Hi.
Say hi.
Hi.
Wait, you can't see. This is Grayson.
Hi.
That's my grandkids. Okay, hurry and get on out of here because Nanny is talking some serious stuff that I'll probably make you listen to when I finish this. Anyway. Okay. So it means that African American descendants of the enslavement no longer, remember now, this demographic for which racism was created originally for. That specific demographic no longer has a unique and differentiated history. I guess that kills reparations. And having been enslaved by the U.S. has no more bearing on any specific reparative or accountability of the government. Oh, hold on. My daughter's here. You want to come and say hi?
No.
Well, then go shoot.
I have movies.
Huh?
I'm watch them.
Oh, yeah. You can put them in my room on my desk.
Okay.
Thank you, darling.
Well, I'm leaving since you're busy.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing an educational essay reading. I'm sorry. Okay. Consider it. Think about this. Think about it as the genocide without murder of an entire group of people by erasing. See, think about that. If African American descendants of the enslavement have all been thrown into the same pile, so you might wonder why all of a sudden now race includes nationalities like Mexicans. Race is used to describe something other than race, because a nationality is not a race, not as they originally defined it back then. See, but they redefined it in 2010 for that census. So I want you to be really, 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 really observant in this 2020 census, because now they are also putting in even more nationality information from what I understand. And they're going to require you to put in your particular nationality. But anyway, I digress. Consider it genocide without murder of an entire group of people by erasing their unique historical lineage in the United States by virtue of their definition of the color black. It means no one will speak for African American descendants of the enslavement, because there is no longer anything in this country which makes their demographic any different from others who live within the system of racism and who are non-white. Even as the very system in place today was designed specifically for African American freed slaves and their descendants all those generations ago, before black became the sole determinant of race in the U.S. This is why, see now, I read somewhere where Kamala is identifying herself as African American, and people are balking because they're like, she's not black. She's not black enough. She's not, but she is. As of 2010, okay? This is why Kamala Harris can identify and associate with black and African American, even though she is Indian and Jamaican. And why Barack Obama can identify as black or African American, even though his mother's white and his father's Kenyan. Remember? Kenya, Nigeria, and Jamaica, and you know what I mean? Because at least since 2010, the terms black, and I read all of that before, that whole idea about the interchangeability of black and African American and the nationalities, the fact that nationalities are also included now as race in terms of black and blackness. And white America knows what it's doing. They know what they're doing. Within the struggle of their constant push and tug and pull on the spectrum of annihilation and assimilation, the creation of diversity, remember that word? That's going to be one of my examinations of racialized words. Diversity for them means inclusivity of people of color. But you have to understand, there is never anything benevolent being done by these people, by these white supremacists. And I'm not talking about your average, everyday white person who really ain't got the power. I'm talking about that 1% who does. Okay? However, when you understand that their identifier color has been tweaked through immigration, they can still exclude the very people for whom the entire racist system was designed to deny opportunity and still satisfy their diversity requirement. See, and people don't understand that dynamic, and that's why you'll hear some people holler about, black people will say, it's immigration. Immigration is the reason why we can't get... Well, in a way, you're right, but it's not immigration. It's white supremacy who is at fault, which is at fault. It's not immigration that's at fault. It's white supremacy, and it's the way that they redefined blackness in 2010. Therefore, and I'm almost done, you should think critically about where the roots of blackness in the U.S. originated and where they live in the U.S. today. Are we really all the same because white America has decided that we are all black and African American despite our roots? Or do our roots afford us more or less of a unique identification? And what is to become of African American descendants of the enslavement in a country where the majority of people who identify as black today are not even descendants of U.S. enslavement and therefore have no generational ancestral legacy or tie? Should the descendants of the enslavement just quietly disappear into the fabric of all people of color, as white America would have them do, without any specific representation as to their own unique roots and needs? Are we to believe that immigration is a bad thing? No. Of course not. Does this mean that we should separate ourselves from all other non-white people in this country? No, of course not. Does it mean that African American descendants of the enslavement should allow their future descendants to disappear into obscurity as time and generations cull the demographic? Erase it? No. Hell no. Does this mean that it is important for African American descendants of the enslavement to have a stake in what is ultimately going to affect their lives moving forward? Yes. So these are the questions that need answers. But just like everything else, these answers must come from each individual black soul. The end. For further information, you can look at the source that I have a link to in the essay, The Black Population 2010 Census Briefs. There is an enormous amount of very interesting information in there that I did not include that you're going to want to know about. So do click that link and read and understand. I'm telling you, when you got a better understanding of what's going on and how things happen, you're forearmed, and it helps you navigate. If you can't drive, you can't go nowhere, okay? You got to learn how to drive. Anyway, I'm going to look at some of these. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. Somebody said it looks... Christine, yeah, the doctor's in. She's a little hoarse, but she's in today. I had written this essay, and I felt like it was really important to get it out because, blackness is not disappearing, but what is disappearing is the unique lineage and roots of African American descendants of the enslavement. I mean, on the one hand, I could say, if we allow ourselves to go into this big melting pot of quote unquote people of color, then and allow our lineage to disappear in history, generations from now, say in 100 years, nobody will remember. It'll be a memory. Yeah, that happened. Like all those. Yeah, black people are black people, no matter where you come from. If you know, we could say that in a sense unifies us. But we don't have to be a race to be unified. We can all be proud of our lineage and our heritage. You know. Let's see. I see where it says people are watching, but nobody's asking questions. Does anybody have a question? So shall we start? This is Maria Kim Freeman. Hi, Mansour. It says, so shall we start documenting ourselves as African American enslaved peoples? And I think we better search for documents that prove our ancestors were slaves. Well, yeah, I, as a matter of fact, did find out. I would call, since you've got that POC acronym that everybody uses, why not AADOE?
Hey, Nanny, your
Hold
food's
on one
here.
sec. Oh, okay. Tell Papa.
We did.
Okay, good. All right. I got to go. All right. Bye-bye. Shut that door for me, Greg. Shut your door. Yeah, because I'm going to be taking questions and stuff. This is real funny. Anyway. Yeah. I think that it's important to find your lineage, to find out where you came, find out not so much where you came from, but find out if you are in fact a descendant of the enslavement. If you are first generation immigrant, one or two parents, both parents, then your lineage is in your country of origin. If you are descended from enslavement on one side of your family, it would be interesting. It would be good to find out. I actually have a 94-year-old aunt who is our resident historian, God love her, my Aunt Ruth. And she's the one who told me about my ancestor, Dicey Spraggins from Virginia, who was a slave and who was raped by Dr. Spraggins, who was a very prominent doctor, and he was from what I understand, very wealthy and powerful, and I had many, many slaves on his plantation in Virginia, and he took a liking to Dicey, I guess, or he just, I won't say took a liking because that's violent. Anyway, I was being facetious. But he raped Dicey, and eventually an offspring was born, Cordelia, and I have that dubious distinction that, but for the rape of my ancestor, I would not be here. Isn't that something? So Cordelia married, and you can't make these names up. Just like Chicken George, well, Cordelia married, Dicey's one thing, but Cordelia married Black Tar Dave. Black Tar Dave Epperson. And that's pretty much how we came to be and how I came to be. So yeah, I am an AADOE, direct AADOE. Yep. So yeah, I think it would be a good idea. I really do. I think it would be a good idea to find out whether you were. If you have family, and that's another thing, if you have family, if you have older relatives, it's a good idea to talk to them and find out about your history as they can only tell it, from what they can remember, and begin to do a family tree. I would also recommend, because you're going to become an ancestor one day. I would recommend beginning a family tree. You can either begin it with yourself or your mother and father or your grandmother and grandfather, or take it back as far as you can take it and build your tree so that your family knows who their ancestors were. Because it's important. You don't want all that to disappear into obscurity. I don't mean necessarily just, slavery will never go away in terms of history, but it will be an obscure history. Okay, no one will care about it. You know, all these years later, everyone cares about the Holocaust. I don't care who you talk to, you mention the word Holocaust and it comes right to the fore. Nazis, Holocaust. But you talk about the enslavement and you get a... And that's by design. That's what they want to happen. Okay? All right, so I'm going to get ready to go. I have been on here long enough. I hope you enjoyed the reading of this essay. Please like and share. Like my page. Get on Facebook. Look for The Doctor Is In. Look for Cynthia Elise Smith on YouTube, where this is going to end up. And subscribe. And the next time I feel so inspired to write another essay, I'll also be inspired to get on here and read it to you. Okay? Take care of yourselves. Learn. Put on your lenses. Keep them on so that you know what's going on and you can see. The doctor's out. Bye-bye now.